Hi, this is the first Montessori curriculum video that I'm going to make this summer. So I thought it would be a good idea to start with the basics, the Montessori areas in the classroom, and kind of how this all works, so to speak. Now, I've been talking about Montessori education to parents and other Montessori educators for decades, so I've got a lot of it up in my head. However, I do have my notes just in case I forget anything that I noted down earlier would be important. So you might see me look down from time to time. With the exception of the infant and toddler level, most Montessori classrooms are divided into areas. At the primary or children's house level, those areas are the practical life area, sensorial, math, language, and cultural. And cultural typically includes an art area, a science area, and a geography area. This is important because at this age, children are developing an internal sense of order. Up until the point where they reach the primary or children's house level, children have been gathering information for 3 years. They've been absorbing it through their interactions with the environment, with their parents, out in the world, in the home, and it's all kind of just a mishmash of information swirling around in there. When they reach 3 years old, they're ready to start organizing that information into categories and developing that internal sense of order that we as adults have. In order to help them do that, it's very important that the Montessori environment be very ordered and organized and predictable. The first area I'd like to talk about is the practical life area. In some schools, this can be called the everyday living area. It's where most children begin at 3 years old when they enter the classroom, and they spend a lot of their time there initially. It's a place where children develop their concentration, their understanding of the work cycle, choosing a work, completing the work, tidying it up, getting it ready for the next person, and returning it to the shelf. They also develop their hand-eye coordination, their focus. It's a great beginning for all of the organization and all of the activities that they're going to be learning later on as they move into the different areas. There are 3 main areas of practical life. There's the fine motor component where children are twisting and pinching and pouring and spooning and really strengthening their fine motor skills for future writing and drawing. There's the care of the person where they learn how to care for themselves and develop independence. And there's the care of the environment, which helps the children understand that they are an important part of the classroom community, or if you're doing this at home, the family community, and that their contributions to caring for their environment, for the house or for the classroom, are both desired and appreciated, but also something that they're very capable of. The next area where children spend their time is the sensorial area. Maria Montessori realized that the more that you train your senses, the more refined they become. And so in her early classrooms, there were a lot of materials that helped children develop and practice using their senses. So in this area, you'll find activities that relate to sight and smell and touch and taste. And children will spend time exploring these materials and practicing and refining those senses. The next area would be the math area. So at this age, in this period of development from 3 to 6 years old, children are beginning their understanding of numerals and quantities in a very concrete way. So the first types of activities they'll engage in are the activities to understand the concept of 1 to 10. Once they've mastered the 1 to 10 activities, there are 3 areas that they can kind of move off into linear counting, which is the teen numbers, the double-digit numbers, all the way up to 100 and on. The decimal system, which introduces units, tens, hundreds, and thousands, and building quantities in those amounts. So, 5 units, 3 tens, so 4 hundreds, etc. And then there's the operations path, where they begin working on addition, multiplication, subtraction, division with single-digit numbers. After a while of working with these materials, whichever path the children go down first, they will still travel down the other paths and learn some of the materials that go in those other areas. But it all kind of comes back together after a little while, where children are adding 4-digit numbers, which includes the operations and includes the decimal system, or they're getting into large enough numbers in the linear counting area that they are moving into units and tens and hundreds and thousands. So you can see how they all kind of come together after a little while. During this time, children are also moving between the concrete and the need to have their hands on mathematical materials in order to understand the concepts into the abstract, starting to memorize math facts, to understand the concept of numbers and the patterns that they make without needing the concrete materials right in front of them all the time. That is something that they get to towards the end of their time in a primary or children's house classroom, and it's one of the signs that they're ready to move on to the lower elementary curriculum. In the language area, children start with what we call the oral language or pre-reading, pre-language materials. Things like understanding opposites, knowing when something matches, understanding a sequence of activities. We also do a lot of oral or phonetic awareness, helping the children to start to hear the sounds in words and giving the children a chance to hear that there are parts to words. So there's a beginning sound, there's an ending sound, there are middle sounds. Then we move into actually learning to read and to write. And in Montessori, writing comes before reading, which often is different than in a more traditional program. The reason behind this is that writing is actually an easier concept. It only has 2 steps. You're taking your own thoughts, which you know, and you're encoding them into symbols, into letters. Whereas reading is a 3-step process. You're taking symbols and you're decoding them and putting them together to derive, to get the word that you're sounding out. But then you also have to get some meaning and try to figure out what the writer or the author is saying. So in Montessori, we do a lot of writing before reading. Now, writing is one avenue in language, as is reading. But we also have the avenue of penmanship, which at this point, or in the early parts, is separate from writing. Penmanship is the actual act of taking a pencil or writing instrument, putting it to paper, and then writing letters, or words, or sentences. Children are ready to phonetically figure out how to spell a word before they're ready to take that concept to a pencil and paper. And so if we separate those 2 tasks, we put penmanship separate and learning how to form the letters correctly as one activity, and sounding out words and figuring out the letters that will create a word in a separate activity, then the children can move forward on those paths separately. And sometimes that means they can move a lot faster with the actual sounding out and writing. So it gives the child a chance to excel and move forward without being hindered by the development of the penmanship part of writing. From that practice of writing comes the ability to read. So as children are practicing sounding out words, they're starting to recognize how to put letters back together to be able to read them. So we have a lot of activities in our language area that involve phonetics. We use lowercase letters. We use the letter sounds when we're referring to letters because those are what children will need most as they're learning to write and as they're learning to read. And as they get older, we introduce more of the uppercase letters, the names of letters, punctuation, things like that, towards the end of their time in the primary or children's house level and as they move into the lower elementary level. That was a very brief overview of the different areas in a Montessori 3 to 6 classroom. This summer, I'll spend more time in future videos going over the areas in detail and talking not only about the skills that children can learn, but also showing you some of the materials and explaining how some of the lessons work. So I hope you'll choose to join me. Have a great day.